How did ancient Romans catch runaway slaves? Imagine you're a well-off Roman citizen. You've got a house in the capital, a wife, children, and now you've bought yourself some valuable movable property, a slave. You face the same problem as a modern car owner: how to keep your property from being stolen, or, in this case, running away. The trouble is, unlike a car, a slave can escape on their own. Some were ex-bandits or came from tribes with a taste for cannibalism. Sure, the seller assured you all his slaves were obedient, docile, and hardworking. But how do you know he wasn't lying? The philosopher Seneca once quoted an old saying, "As many slaves as you have, so many enemies you own." A potential Spartacus might be great entertainment in the arena, but you wouldn't want him loose in your villa, especially if your wife and daughter live there too. Constant watch. Slaves were kept under constant supervision, not just by overseers, but by other slaves. Informing on fellow slaves was encouraged. A slave who stopped a serious crime, such as a murder or escape, could be rewarded, sometimes even with freedom. But if the crime happened anyway, everyone paid the price. Roman law was brutal. If a household slave murdered the master, all slaves in the house were crucified. If a slave escaped, the rest could be punished for failing to report suspicious behavior. The slave collar. From ancient times, Romans used collars to mark their slaves. Each one had a tag stating the master's name. Trusted slaves might wear a symbolic, lightweight version. But new slaves, or those doing hard labor, were fitted with heavy iron rings that couldn't be removed without tools. When a slave escaped, if a slave ran, the master immediately informed the magistrates. The authorities were keen to help. First, because the master paid a fee for the slave's return. Second, runaway slaves often turned to banditry. If too many were at large, a full-scale revolt could erupt. Notices with the slave's description went out to surrounding towns. Anyone who spotted the runaway was expected to seize them or report to the authorities. There was a reward. Hiding a fugitive slave was a serious crime. Spotting a slave. Could you tell a slave from a free person at a glance? Absolutely. Slaves wore their hair cropped short, dressed in ragged patchwork clothing, and went bareheaded. Even without a collar, their appearance gave them away. In Rome, people knew their neighbors and their neighbors' slaves, so strangers stood out instantly. Female runaways had it even harder. Respectable Roman women always went out in 2 layers of clothing, with their head covered. A bareheaded woman in a single dress was obviously a slave. Any free citizen could stop an unfamiliar slave woman and demand to know her master. The hunt. A determined master might hire a professional slave catcher, but the best way to track a runaway was to alert local shepherds. Escaped slaves avoided roads and hid in remote areas, but shepherds knew every inch of the countryside. Catching runaways was part of their regular business. In short, a runaway in ancient Rome needed exceptional skill and a lot of luck to stay free for long. If you enjoyed this story, give it a like and subscribe. See you in the next episode.